City Hall was firebombed yesterday by Development Corporation board members and staffers unhappy about how city government uses $10 million in annual revenues from the half-cent sales tax as its own personal slush fund. City Hall is still burning, and we have the scoop. I'm Yantis Green, and this is Live. But first, is your man a fan of Yellowstone? Inspired by Rip Wheeler of the hit series Yellowstone, this cologne embraces an ethos of rough and tumble cowboy cool. It's a handcrafted fragrance with notes of desert verbena, yellow grapefruit, vetiver root, golden aspen, and Atlas cedarwood. A fresh and clean, woody scent for everyday wear, the masculine stuff. It's only available in San Angelo at Myers Drug. They are more than just a pharmacy. It's the greatest little gift shop in San Angelo. Myers Drug at the corner of Beauregard and Chadbourne in historic downtown San Angelo, or visit them online at myersdrug.com. Topping the news, City Hall was firebombed during the monthly meeting of the San Angelo Development Corporation Wednesday morning, and it's still burning. John Berriew, COSA DC's vice chair, took most of the time during the regularly scheduled corporate meeting, expressing his frustration with policies, procedures, manpower, and fiduciary decisions at the corporation. COSA DC manages the revenue from that half-cent sales tax the city of San Angelo collects. This portion of the sales tax collected within the city limits is exclusively earmarked for economic development projects. In addition to financing hundreds of millions of dollars in development projects, such as the Hickory Pipeline project, the corporation pays for a staff of 4 and contracts with the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce to perform cooperative economic development services. Berriew argued that the city manager's office has assumed authority over what items were to be placed on the COSA DC's agenda. Berriew said that although each board member takes an oath to run the $10 million annual revenue corporation, quote, our hands are tied because our staff has been harnessed by city staff. Our staff is serving a two-headed beast. Former COSA DC Director Guy Andrews claimed that the Downtown District Cityscape Project and an expensive West Texas Water Partnership project were dictated by the city manager to be funded by COSA DC without deliberation of the COSA DC board. Assistant City Manager Michael Dane countered that every dime COSA DC spends is vetted through a political process at the City Council, and nothing was illegal about funding the projects the City Council wants done. Let's watch the fireworks.
Some of the motivations for training, such as we need to have the provisions that allow the corporation to act as an independent corporation to some degree, is because in a Type B, under the law, Type B, Economic Development Corporation, things have historically in other cities gotten out of hand where the half-cent sales tax funds end up being a piggy bank for pet projects, politically motivated, rather than approach sensibly with an expected return on the dollar for the taxpayer. It becomes a very challenging thing. And we do try to vet that, and that is the purpose of this board.
Well, but I'd like to ferret out that sentiment that you are correct. This board's job is to fund projects, and all of those projects are subject to a political process. So to characterize that activity as funding pet projects, we're a piggy bank for pet projects. All of those projects receive due process in which political figures are involved.
Later, Assistant City Manager Michael Dane presented an argument that COSA DC's staff was overmanned when compared to other cities that are San Angelo's size. hinting that reducing the force for its staffers. He was met with a forceful retort from one of those staffers whose job may be eliminated.
This is a grouping of cities. This grouping is cities that are approximately our population and that are approximately in our location. You can see on the, first of all, the white bar indicates, the line indicates revenue levels. And the blue bars indicate staffing levels. So in the way of orientation, the revenue for the city of San Angelo on the far left for economic development only is approximately $2.9 million.
I think it's important to frame this discussion a little more appropriately. As a matter of public record, it's important that I clarify that this is not an apples-to-apples comparison, and I'm not certain who prepared it, but I'll return to the previous slide. The total revenue line, ignoring the misspelling of the word revenue for a moment, we have $2.8 million. That is not the total revenue for San Angelo Economic Development Corporation reported to the comptroller. And while I can appreciate that this number is the number that we're homing in on as the number, the revenue brought in is 28%, that is not an accurate apples-to-apples comparison. The revenue number is above $10 million a year. The city retains that 72%, roughly over $7 million a year. So I think we should frame that more appropriately, because these discussions that center around bodies, as they've been deemed this morning, are not bodies. They're livelihoods. They're people. They are people. And I think it is irresponsible to frame it any other way. And so to disregard that in any analysis is reckless. It is irresponsible. The priority, from my perspective as a member of the public and as administrator of this corporation, is that we look at this responsibly. This analysis is nothing short of offensive. Nothing short of offensive. I don't know where to go beyond that. But it does not paint an accurate picture, and to not clarify that for this board would be concerning to me. I don't know if I can let that continue.
Now, how the city management crawls out of the damage done at yesterday's COSA DC board meeting is anyone's guess. There are more twists and turns on the issue, too. For more about that, see the exclusive story, Economic Developers Firebomb City Hall, on the homepage of sanangelolive.com. In other news, a San Angelo man was arrested yesterday for allegedly breaking a woman's leg. According to law enforcement, on September 21st, officers responded to a Northside residence on 25th Street regarding an unknown problem. Once on the scene, officers located a victim with a severely broken leg. On September 28th, investigators spoke with witnesses and other individuals involved and determined that the statement received by the victim and the defendant, identified as Stephen Thomas Walter, contradicted the statement given by witnesses. Walter was arrested and charged with aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury and booked into the Tom Green County Detention Facility on September 28th and has a $100,000 bond. This was not only the only domestic violence incident that landed someone in jail over the last 24 hours either. Early this morning, a San Angelo woman was arrested after she tried to cut her boyfriend's throat with a box cutter. San Angelo police arrested 38-year-old Raquel Yoakum after her boyfriend called the cops on her. Police were able to determine that the two had been arguing in bed when the woman attacked him. He then fled to the living room. This is when the girlfriend pulled out the box cutter and threatened her boyfriend's life. Wow, talk about toxic. Yoakum was booked into the jail this morning and was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. She was released later on a $50,000 bond. In business news, a new barbecue joint has opened in a familiar location. Smitty's Barbecue, Smitty's Smokehouse, has opened up at 2402 MLK Boulevard, which is the old Fatty's Grill location. Owner Daniel Smith and his team have had the idea since May and have been working on making their dream a reality. After a couple of months of work, the barbecue restaurant was ready to open. Smitty's Smokehouse will be open Monday through Saturday from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. They will serve breakfast from 6 to 10 and then lunch from 11 to 2. They'll serve barbecue favorites like brisket, pulled pork, pulled chicken, and other items, of course, like brisket grilled cheese and loaded spuds. In national news today, of course, what everybody's talking about is Hurricane Ian. Hurricane Ian has devastated Florida over the last couple of days. As of now, the hurricane has been downgraded to a tropical storm, but experts are expecting Ian to build up strength over the warm waters of the Atlantic. In Florida, the damage has been severe, and reports are nearly 100 people could have lost their lives. In the wake of that devastating storm, many liberal heads...
What do you know right now about injuries and fatalities, and do you have any sense, any estimate of how many people are left to be rescued?
So while I don't have confirmed numbers, I definitely know the fatalities are in the hundreds. There are thousands of people that are waiting to be rescued. And again, cannot give a true assessment until we're actually on scene assessing each scene, and we can't access people. That's the problem.
Now, many on the left, liberals and some of the talking heads on TV, are blaming the whole thing on climate change. In fact, the left's leader, President Biden, hinted at it earlier today. Let's give that a listen.
Our commitment to tackling the climate crisis, which threatens all of us, we're seeing the consequences of climate change around the world very vividly, including in the United States right now. And I know your nations feel it acutely. And for you all, it's an existential threat. It's an existential threat.
Now, the hurricane may be in Florida, but this Friday night there's going to be a blizzard in Texas as Winters begins district play against the Cisco Lobos. To get you prepared, our Cover One analyst James Bellini breaks down the district. James?
Yesterday, we talked about Hawley, Stanford, and Olney. Today, we'll speak on the other 4 teams in District 4-2A, the Colorado City Wolves, Anson Tigers, Winters Blizzards, and the Cisco Lobos. Let's start with the 0-5 Anson Tigers. The Tigers have a new head coach in Corey McCombs, who jumped over there from Lockney. Anson has a fairly young team and only 3 starters on both offense and defense returned from last season. That means sophomores and juniors are taking the snaps. Hey, it's first-year head coach with a young team. Over the next few years, Anson could be a team to watch. Speaking of first-year head coaches, the Colorado City Wolves also have one in Monty Leaf. Coach Leaf had a better return on players from last year, 7 on offense and 4 on defense. When playing Colorado City, watch out for Jordan Garza and running back Aiden Brazino, as they have the majority of the rushing yards. The passing game is kind of a work in progress, but Trey Martinez, Mason Monroe, and Jordan Rashke are the guys Garza targets when throwing. Just north of the Contra Valley, the Winters Blizzards have been battle-tested this year. They started off against Cross Plains, then won against a good El Dorado team in overtime. Then they played 3A San Angelo TLCA, and they lost by 2. Last 2 weeks, they played Miles and Stanford. Winters has a couple good young players in Chris Martinez and Aiden Lee. Yes, Cisco Lobos are playing good football this year, and if it wasn't for a tremendous play by Hawley's Will Scott last season, they very easily could have been the team to move on to state. Coach Stennett had 15 starters returned from last season, and the Lobos mean business this year, and their pre-district games prove it, as they've taken on some good 3A teams like the Wall Hawks, Clyde Bulldogs, Breckenridge Buckaroos, and Jacksboro Tigers. Cisco quarterback Hunter Long doesn't throw much, but he has rushed for 511 yards this season. Running back Trent Huston has 320 yards, and these two account for 13 touchdowns, all in 4 games this year. Receiver Jeremy Hernandez keeps defenses honest with 168 yards and a couple of scores. Look, I know this isn't really a Contra Valley district, but we could very well see a couple of these teams make a run towards state. This Division I group of schools is highly competitive, and the defending Division II school, the Stratford Elks, made the jump to D1. As we start getting through district, you should watch a couple of these teams. We will be, so tune in to Cover 1 at around 4, 8, and 10 o'clock for scores, exclusive interviews, highlights, and more, only on SanAngeloLive.com.
When it comes to unique pieces you can't find anywhere else, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is your one-stop shop. With over 24 years in the diamond and coin industry, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is West Texas's choice for diamonds, jewelry, coins, silver, and gold. Owner Bill Cano stands by his work and offers free consultations, including estate jewelry. Don't just trust anyone with your valuables. Come see the staff at Cano's at 1016 West Beauregard in San Angelo.
Thank you, James. And we're back. We have our interview segment today. My name is Joe Hyde. I'm the publisher of San Angelo Live. And I'm joined with a man who was in the news maybe 3 years ago, when he retired as the municipal judge of the city of San Angelo, the much beloved Judge Alan Gilbert. And he's back in the news again. This time probably for reasons he doesn't want to do it, but he's serving his community as, are you the chair? Is that what you are?
Yes.
He is the chair of the City of San Angelo's Charter Review Committee. Now that's code for, should we appoint a police chief or elect a police chief? That's the primary ordinance that you're looking at. Is that correct?
That is the only thing that we are looking at.
So we're not reviewing anything else.
I understand there's a few things that the city council's perhaps looking at, but the committee itself is only looking at the elected versus the appointed chief.
Now, you said you can argue this point both ways, because you've been in city government for a long time. You've worked closely with, I imagine, a lot of police chiefs over your career.
That's correct, Joe. I 44 years now, because I'm still there as the associate judge, so I guess about 47 years now. And during that time, I'd have to check, but I think I went through 12 chief of police.
12 chiefs of police. Now, I've only been through two. I've been through the Vasquez administration and Frank Carter.
Okay.
So I don't know anything before that of what happened. I do know, just listening to the old heads talk, that a lot of things have changed over the years as far as how the police force is organized.
That's correct. There's been a lot of changes, but just in the world in general, there's been a lot of changes. And,
right.
And as I said, with 12 chief of police, I was probably the closest person to the police department without being in the police department. And we've been fortunate to have some really great chief of police. We've had that opportunity, and we have a good police department. And the current administration is doing a great job. When we were asked to look at this as a committee, nothing was said other than the fact that it has nothing to do with the current administration, because Chief Carter and his group are doing a great job.
And that's Chief Frank Carter, who's the current chief of police. He was elected in 2016. So we're coming up on his second term right now.
I think that's correct. Next year, I believe he runs for re-election if he decides that's what he wants to do. So, but for years and years, we've had an elected chief of police here in San Angelo. And over the years, I've been a part of it when we had 15, 20 cities in the state of Texas that all had elected chief of police. And they slowly just went to the appointed chiefs one by one. And then finally, I think Brownwood and Coleman were the last two to go. And now we're the last one.
So we're the only city in Texas that elects its police chief.
As far as we can find out, that is correct.
Okay. So the benefits and the benefits of electing your police chief, obviously in those other towns they figured out it wasn't as good as appointing a police chief. And I think I'll just do my own editorializing here. I think because as we've professionalized not only police forces, but we've professionalized city management. We have the Texas Municipal League. Right. We have standards. We have training, that kind of thing that's going on. And as we didn't have that in 1954.
No.
Right? So things have changed as far as where the manpower is coming from, where the font of manpower is coming from. So if I'm in Abilene, I have this full menu of a lot of people I can choose to come move to Abilene or recruit to Abilene to be my police chief. Where in San Angelo, we're kind of stuck with whoever runs for police chief, which I guess they have. What is the requirements to run for a police chief right now?
There's basically two requirements in the city of San Angelo to run for chief of police. You have to have been a resident of the city of San Angelo, I believe, for 2 years. Mm-hmm. You have to be 18 years or older.
Okay, so those two, resident for 2 years.
I believe that's correct.
So if someone, let's say, is moving up the TML, I'm going to just call it the TML ladder.
Okay.
They have to move here to San Angelo, I guess, work at the police department as a line guy, and then run for police chief.
And then run for chief of police.
So we're not going to attract anyone that's in the I guess, the recruitment space for police chiefs.
Well, no, you're not going to be like having headhunters out there looking for these individuals. Fortunately, in 1960, the city of San Angelo adopted civil service. Mm-hmm. And in the civil service provisions, there are provisions in that adoption that's that is now there that provides for requirements for an appointed police chief.
Right.
But nowhere in civil service does it provide for an elected chief of police. It does state that these are the requirements unless elected.
So how are we getting away with having an elected police chief and a civil service police force?
Well, because of home rule city, the city is allowed through its charter to make those decisions.
So we can be different.
We can be. There were several cities. Abilene was different. We were
Right.
different. There are several cities that were different in that aspect. And there's some questions that have come up about that. But Lord, I'm not about to get into that discussion.
Okay.
So, but yes, everything is legal the way it's being done. And of course, that came about. I think the original election was for elected chief came about in either the late 40s, early 50s, somewhere around there. Things have changed. In the 70s, they changed. But really,
Well, what changed in the 70s?
well,
I mean, in the 40s, I think we had disgruntlement amongst the citizenry about a particular police chief, and they wanted to select their own. Or no, they fired him, right? And everyone loved the guy, and they wanted to reinstall him. And that how it happened?
I honestly can't tell you that because I've heard so many stories, and since I'm not old enough to have been
You weren't around here in 1942.
I wasn't. The City Hall people, City Hall call me all the time and say, "Hey, can you tell us why this was changed in 1953?" No, I was 2. I don't know, but I haven't been here forever. But there are some people I go to when those questions come up. But in the 70s, things started changing. Of course, we used to have 2-year terms elected chief, then we went to 4-year terms. And things started changing then because the police association now has a chief of police association. They started somewhere about in that time. Educational processes, just like in municipal courts, educational processes got different certification programs. All these things have come about. And it just continues to change, just as you had said about you have city managers, you have many people working in City Hall that are certified in city government.
Right.
And so this has gone through part of the one place that hasn't changed in ours is in the chief of police. And I talked about the qualifications for under civil service. We have a lot of police officers in our department that would meet the standards and the qualifications to be appointed to the appointed chief position.
Now, I'll just go back. I'll roll back a little bit. Right after Desert Storm, I'm going to tell you a little story. I was flying with my old wing commander. He was this old Vietnam guy, right? And we were talking about, George H.W. Bush won the war. We were very happy with that, and we felt like we'd really accomplished something. And I was saying, why is President Bush going to lose the election? And he says, because, Joe, when you're on MTV, and the biggest issue is what kind of underwear you wear, boxers or briefs. Remember that? The electorate is no longer serious about who they select to be their leaders.
Right.
So is it an argument of the people who are for the appointed chief thing that our electorate is not serious enough to be able to select the proper police chief?
I don't think you can say that. I think my biggest concern is because during this committee work, I was there all those years, and I thought I knew a whole lot about what went into the elected versus appointed, but I found a lot of things that I didn't know. But I think our public should be informed on all aspects, elected and appointed, because I can argue both sides of those. There's some sides I can argue on both of those. But I think that as the voters of the city of San Angelo, that we hear a lot of people say a lot of times, well, the standards are there. And when they say those are really the only 2 requirements, they're like, I'm shocked.
Well, let's stop there on the standards. If you back up on the standards and you look at what are the standards to be elected sheriff, a county sheriff, there's none, right?
You have to be a resident, I believe, of the state of Texas, and then you have to get elected and reside within the county.
So we elected 254 sheriffs for the last, I guess, since Reconstruction. I don't think.
Forever.
Yeah, and we haven't had any problems with the elected sheriffs. So why is it all of a sudden these cities are moving toward, or have moved toward the appointed chief, and why should we move toward the appointed chief?
I talked to a lot of people in a lot of towns that made the change, and a lot of them said that they wanted to bring in new ideals, fresh ideals for their police department. The one thing that I can say that the chief of police in San Angelo have a hard time having a 10-year plan, because you
They don't know if they're gonna be there.
You have a 4-year term, and
Right.
before you had a 2-year term. So that planning process has never really taken place. Now I know our current administration has some long-term goals and things of this nature, but they're not always allowed to go because the city council also knows when it's budget time, this guy may be gone next year, and we can't change gears right in the middle.
So let's just cut his budget and not give him the extra officers he needs because
Well, I don't-
he's a dead duck anyway.
It could be
Yeah,
that.
that's going to be Frank Carter's problem. I hope Frank's not watching, but it might be his
Frank will
problem.
be watching because he'll call me later and tell me if I messed up on anything, I'm sure. But, and not that the city council does that, but, the department, the men, if like right now, we know there's a couple of candidates coming out for the chief of police.
And the election's going to be next year. It's 2023.
23, I believe, that's correct. On the elected,
No, it won't be. It's going to be, let's see, 2020, it's going to be 2024.
But the election for appointed versus elected
It's
will
going to be in the spring.
Be in the spring of May of 23. So, there's just a lot out there, and people in other cities, tell us when I talk to city managers and other people that they want to look at different ideals. They want to look at bringing people in. When you have different candidates, the department sometimes splits and goes different directions. They seem to basically afterwards be able to come back together pretty well. But some people say, well, we don't need to lose this time.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, I've gone back and forth between wanting an appointed and versus elected. But I tell you what changed my mind a lot, and I've kind of become more convinced that the elected chief is the way to go. And I think our model ought to be benchmarked by other cities, particularly bigger cities. Is the BLM riots of 2020? I mean, when you get political, when you politicize the issues facing law enforcement, defund the police. When you start doing that, and people all of a sudden discover that their F-150 in their parking lot's getting broken into and their laptop's stolen, there's nothing that infuriates a citizen or a voter more and feeling more violated than petty burglary crime like that. Wouldn't you agree?
That's right.
And I think that the elected chief gives people an option or gives them an out that they can express when they're upset about the crime rate, for example. And also about the ideological tilt of a particular thing. Now, I'll give you, I'm going to talk a little bit about an example I think would be apropos. The TML, the Texas Municipal League, that manages a lot of the programs that our city government professionals come up through. I mean, it's a big organization coming out of the urban areas of Texas, and for lack of a better word, I say they're woke, right? So do we want a woke city manager selecting a woke city chief of police to take care of our F-150 in our parking lot or in our driveway? I mean, that's what I get to. I mean, it's because our institutions have been taken over by, I think it's a corrosive politics, toxic politics. Are we going to give it away?
Well, we can certainly say that's occurred in some parts of this country, I think. So,
Right.
And that's a big question. It's just like I've heard that up north, after some of the mayors supposedly told their police chief to stand down, that some of those cities are now looking at going to an elected chief instead of appointed. I still have a question of wondering where in the world the mayor gets the authority to tell the chief of police not to do his job.
That's
And
right.
he has his authority, so
I guess
wonder about that.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that. If the mayor oversees the city council, which hires or fires the city manager. The city manager, I'm talking in a city manager strong government like most Texas cities, except Houston are. The mayor generally runs the agenda of the city council, so he or she can dictate, fire the police chief or tell the police chief this. Through the city manager. The city manager derives its power from the city council, whereas in an appointed situation, the chief of police only derives his power from the city manager.
Well, it depends on, you can set it up, the way the civil service provides for is for the city manager to make an appointment, but the appointment can only be made with the city council's consent. So you've got 7 people that are going to vote to hire the person you're going to hire. And in the same category, you've got 7 people that are going to vote to fire
Right.
that person. So you do have a standard there that's set, a balance and check situation.
Right.
You know, I know a lot of people have said, well, let's have a committee to look at law enforcement and to kind of serve to recommend and talk about those things. But the civil service requirements that we adopted do not provide for that. They provide for the appointment of the chief of police.
Right.
And so we would have to go by those rules that have been established.
Okay, I'm going to put on my pro-appointed hat now. I learned this in the Air Force. In the Air Force, we rotate our commanders out every 3 years, roughly.
Okay.
That's why you see Goodfellow. We get a new commander about every 2 to 3 years. And the reason is because the Air Force management philosophy, the military management philosophy, is we want to develop not only depth of experience, meaning if you fly an airplane, you know every nook and cranny of that F-15, right? But you also want to have a breadth of experience where you can work with, for example, tankers or bombers, that kind of thing. So in the police departments of Texas, we have a depth versus breadth situation. By going in the elected process, because we're not going to attract anyone from out of town, we're basically doubling down on electing chiefs with a depth of experience without that breadth of experience. For example, Frank Carter, who's done a pretty good job, he has immense depth of experience in being a police officer in San Angelo, Texas. But he does not have a breadth of experience of having served in Houston or served in smaller communities like Del Rio, for example. So what do you think? Do you think that the breadth of experience that we would gain from going to the appointed chief and be able to pick from this menu of probably hundreds of potential candidates is worth giving up the right to elect a police chief?
No and yes.
Okay.
Well, you have to look at this, that first off, as I told you a while ago, we have a lot of people that are qualified. I understand what you're talking about, experiences coming from out and long terms. Well, first let's look at Alabama. Saban seems to be doing pretty good there. He's been there a long period of time.
All right, so Alabama, the football team.
Alabama, the football team. They don't seem to need this new breath coming in.
Yeah, they need a depth of experience of Saban.
Yeah, and so, but also when you bring a person in from other areas, there's so much that goes into law enforcement that is community oriented. I've been, I served several years on the Judicial Council for the state of Texas, so we worked with all the courts in the state of Texas. So I was in cities all over the state for years working with them. And some of the things that I saw when they brought people in from other states, it didn't work well.
Right.
Sometimes changed them in from other cities within Texas. Some of that works well, but there's a whole lot of difference between Houston, Texas, and San Angelo, Texas, Dallas, Texas, San Angelo, Texas.
Right.
There's a lot of things here that people would want, and there's a lot of things here that people don't want. So I think what you look at on the other side of that is what we need. If we're going to stay with an elected system, then we need to develop a system within our department that allows the opportunity for several of our policemen, as they obtain certain ranks and levels, that gives them the opportunity to go to FBI training, gives them the opportunity to go to many schools to make sure they're certified under the
What about allowing a San Angelo police officer to transfer for a temporary time to Austin?
Why not?
And come back?
Why not?
You know, those kinds of things, that would give a breadth of experience.
The breadth of experience outside. And we can develop training within our department that allows people to come up so that we always continue to do that. In the court, anytime I knew we were getting anywhere within 5 years of a court administrator leaving, I started training another one because they knew the community, they knew everything. Never had to go outside because we had a program developed to get them to that state.
Kind of like football. You know, Coach Kevin Crane wants to make sure that Pee Wee football is
right.
live and well.
That's right.
Because he wants to get the experience for those kids early. All right, one last thing we'll go over. One of the biggest detractors for having an elected police chief is the fact that we, every 4 years, or I guess if you have a contentious rule, so to speak, like under Vasquez, 2008 was a very contentious year. 2016 was awfully contentious. Those were election years for police chief. I believe in 2008, Vasquez was opposed by 7 of his fellow officers for police chief. In 2016, it was a four-man race total, including Vasquez. Both of those years, they say those are lost, and it tore up the police department and everything like that. Do you really think that the damage was that bad?
I really can't answer that question. You know,
Well, you were the judge back then. You were dealing with the municipal tickets.
I was dealing with those and a lot of things that went on. You know, I can tell you this much. There was some turmoil at certain times, not only during that time, but I've seen it with other chiefs. But I will say that the character of many of the San Angelo Police Department officers carried on doing their job, doing it fairly. And I do not believe that they allowed any of those kind of things to interfere with them doing their job.
And the crime rate didn't really spike up. There was no really any external things. I mean, I view it now in retrospect. I mean, at the time I hated it, you know, because you're in the news business, they're all trying to grab you on their side,
Right,
you know.
right.
I mean, it's very contentious. But the more you go through it, the more you know how to handle it. You just kind of laugh, shrug it off from now on. But
You have to do that. And as a judge, I'm you know,
you're receiving the spears too?
I'm from the public to the police department. You know, it's kind of like I tell people all the time, and my job is that 100% of the time when I walked in the courtroom, I was going to make 50% of the people mad. I just didn't care which 50% it was, because the facts are the facts.
Right, right.
And that's what you have to base them on. And it's the same way, you know, the police officers have more leeway out there of giving their options and things. And so, but yes, the police department handles themselves very professionally and very good. One thing I do want to say before we move on, if I might, this committee that we have, the people that have worked on this, I have never been a part of a committee that worked this hard. It's not that we just looked at these factors. You know, we didn't talk about even the...
So who's on the committee? You have Billy DeWitt, the former city councilwoman.
Billy DeWitt. We have...
I'm putting
Candy,
you on the spot.
you are. We got Candy on there. We got Jeff's on there. Mark. I just don't want to forget anybody.
But all of them are doing this voluntarily.
Yes.
And they're probably going to take a lot of spears too, because this is a contentious topic to talk about in San Angelo.
Yes, and one of the very first things I told them when we got started was that you're going to make some people mad when we make a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to make some people mad. Now, the one thing that I did see for the public's benefit is that when people came in, it was pretty obvious to tell which side they were on.
Mm-hmm.
And we met twice a week for at least 2 hours every time, and then we had homework.
Mm-hmm.
This was the hardest working committee I ever saw, because we were told we had to have it all ready for the November deal. Well, by the time we got to our third meeting, it was very obvious in that room that nobody was committed one way or the other totally.
Okay.
Because when
on
they
your
started,
committee.
on the committee.
So if you took the vote, it was a jury, it'd be hung.
It would have been hung jury.
Yeah.
And people were saying, you know, and they told us, I came in here believing that we should go this way, and now I'm kind of thinking we might ought to go this way.
Mm-hmm.
And when the reason that we put it off for us to go to May is because in talking to the people out here, once we started informing them about some of these things, you know, people say, well, the chief has total control of the police department. Well, that's not true either. The city council that controls their budget. They control who goes on what shift, things of this nature. If there's an appeal from that process, then it goes to the
and they have the civil service process, so you
commission.
can't just. It's not like you own your own business and,
No.
and fire at will.
No,
I mean,
it's
you
not.
have to go through the steps.
The chief had the same rules and regulations. They got the same laws that they're under. You know, they can't dismiss tickets for people. They can't do this kind of stuff. And so those things all have to be looked at out there. And this committee looked at every one of these things. We brought in people from out of town. We did research. We talked. We did everything we possibly could. And we said, once we started talking to the public and people were going, man, I didn't realize this. And then we said, you know what? People really don't understand. So let's see if we can get an opportunity to inform the public and then let them make their decision. I'm not going to try to tell anybody to vote one way or the other.
So the committee is deferred, even voting on whether or not to recommend elected versus appointed, and instead going to the direction of let's just inform people or educate the people about what it is.
That's right.
And then let them make a decision on the ballot.
No, but what we're going to do is we're going to have town meetings. We're going to have a couple of town meetings. We're
Okay.
talking with you. We've been on television with the city. We're going to be on some other programs. And then we're going to have 2 town meetings that we hopefully everybody we can get to listen that's interested. And then we want to get their feedback.
Okay.
because then we'll get their feedback, and then we'll say, okay, look, we got this, A, B, C, and D. We want to know what the public's thinking. The last time they had this election, it was 73 thereabout percent
Against appointed chief.
That's right.
They wanted to keep their
They wanted
elected
to keep
chief.
the elect. So if we go out, if we inform and do everything we can, and we do a straw vote out here, and we find out it's 74%, well, why in the world would we want to go up there and say, let's do an appointed chief of police? You know, there's options. We don't have to say elected versus appointed. We can say, all right, let's stay with elected, but then let's put some qualifications on that says you have to have master's through TCO, you have to have so many years experience, you have to have worked as a commander, A, B, C, and D, and put reasonable requirements on there so that the person getting elected has to meet those standards.
Well, let me add on the standards argument. So if you downgrade, I guess if you downgrade the ballot initiative from you choose between elected versus appointed to you keep elected, but we're going to add these standards to it. I would argue that neither Tim Vasquez or Frank Carter would be eligible to be the police chief of Brownwood, Texas when they were elected. They didn't have the qualifications. Now, in Vasquez's case, if I remember right, he went to school and he started getting all the certifications and stuff after he got elected. In Frank's case, I think he did. I don't know if he did the same thing or not, but I don't think that they would qualify for those particular requirements.
The requirement that most cities use, and I use the word most, it may be very close there, but they use a master's TCO certification from the police department. And you have to have so many years, you have to have been a commander, you have to have been supervisor, A, B, C, and D. And my understanding is that Frank does meet those qualifications.
He meets all those qualifications?
And in fact, what we were told, if memory serves me correctly, that we have over 50 police officers in our department that meet the qualifications as set forward.
Of that 50, how many want to run?
None that I know of. Well, I guess 2 that I know of.
Right.
But, yeah, and we've talked to some police officers on this, and of course, I wouldn't dare indulge or say anything about that part of it, but it's both ways, too. We've talked to retired police officers, retired chiefs, retired assistant chiefs to get their opinion. So we have tried to turn over every rock possible, because then once we establish what we believe, we're heading into what the community of San Angelo wants and what's best for the city of San Angelo, then we will go back to the city council in January and say, this is our recommendation.
I see. And the recommendation is probably going to be something less than elected versus appointed, because we know that.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I really don't know that.
You're being the judge now.
Well,
you're being what do you call it? Secretive now.
I know there's no secret because we haven't. We did. I'll be honest and I tell you this. When we went to city council to ask them, we thought, well, what if they say no, you can't have it? What's your recommendation? We started looking at what our recommendation would be. So we were ready and prepared that if that had occurred to have given them a recommendation. But we also voted a majority to say we don't want this to be our recommendation at this time because we are not sure. We want the public's input before we ever make that recommendation.
So to summarize this, January is the drop dead date. Some day, probably the first city council meeting.
First week in January, we have to have it to them because there's a period of time that they have to call the election.
Okay, and this is for a ballot initiative to change the city ordinance, the city charter.
City charter.
And it could be as draconian as, elected versus appointed chief, or it could be a minor revision or minor, I guess you call it a improvement,
right,
by putting the chief of police requirements in there.
Yes.
Okay, those are kind of like our two options.
That's pretty. We basically have 3 options, or we can do nothing,
or do nothing. Right. Okay.
So we have 3 options to look at.
All right. So the next step. You've done the media tour. Are you going to do the mashed potatoes circuit and go to the Rotary clubs and the Lions clubs?
Well, there's a whole lot of those going on out there, and so I'm not sure we're all going to make it to those. But we are going to have 2 townhouse. We have 2 town meetings that we're going to ask people to come to, and those will be put out on the website. Go to the website what the city has, and that will give you all this information.
That's COSA. I'm sorry, COSATX.us. So
I believe that's correct.
COSAUS.tx. I've been saying COSA DC all day, so I'm going to keep running this. COSATX.us is the city website. But well, Judge Alan Gilbert, he's still serving the community even in retirement. And we'd certainly appreciate that as citizens of San Angelo, and to be able to delve into this issue and with your expertise. I mean, I think it's important. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And this is Joe Hyde. We'll be back tomorrow with Cover 1. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hey folks, Todd Price from Jim Bass Ford. Have you noticed the last couple of years cars and trucks have been overpriced? Well, not anymore. At Jim Bass, we have a slew of F-150s priced around $4,000 off MSRP. Now, my Uncle Perk used to tell me, Todd, opportunities are never lost. Somebody takes the ones you miss. Don't y'all miss this one. Jim Bass Ford, Houston Hart and Hardin Road, or 24/7 at bassbunch.com.